Hi, I'm David Fox. Last Saturday, we recorded this talk, and there were a bunch of technical difficulties, and we're going to redo it. You may notice that we're going to do this secretly and not even mention this, but Outspace updated their avatars today, so I look totally different than I did on Saturday, so there's no way we could have gotten away with pretending that it was the same talk over again. So I'm going to do it again, and we'll use the Q&A from the original talk after I finish.
All right, guys, so thanks again for everyone being here. So thanks for joining the XR Creators Unite event today. I'm going to kick this off by introducing pretty much a legend. It's Mr. David Fox. If you played some of the OG LucasArts games back in the day, make sure you thank him after the presentation. He's a co-founder of the Marin Computer Center. So this was a world's first public access micro center in 1977. Author of a bunch of great books, Computer Animation Primer, Armchair BASICs, Pascal Primer, and then he became a founder of Lucasfilm Games and LucasArts. So during his 10-year run there, he's game designer, project leader, a programmer, you name it, he just about did it. So we're very grateful to have him today because he's been pretty busy recently, actually, with some new work in Thimbleweed Park. Really cool Kickstarter funded graphics adventure game. He's working with other ex-members of LucasArts. Currently, he heads up Electric Eggplant. He's been making mobile, AR, VR, XR, all the reality games. So, David, I was looking through your portfolio. Man, it's a real honor to introduce you. Seriously, these are some of the first computer games I think I played. I do remember Indiana Jones pretty well. So, with that said, I'm gonna let you take the floor.
So I'm going to talk about Rube Works VR, which is a game that we're in process of producing right now for VR platforms, probably for AR also. I want to talk about Rube Goldberg first. Rube Goldberg is probably, those in the United States may have heard his name more than people in other countries, but Rube was a cartoonist, and he was in vaudeville. He ended up writing a script for the first Three Stooges movie. He wrote songs, but he was mostly known for his cartoons and really for his chain reaction machine cartoons. In fact, his name ended up in the dictionary as a comically involved, complicated invention, laboriously contrived to perform a simple operation. Most of us know his work more recently from YouTube videos. First, here's Rube. He was born on the 4th of July in 1883, and he died in 1970. He was also the president of the first president of the National Cartoonists Association, and they have the Reuben Award, which is named after him, for the best cartoonist, the outstanding cartoonist of the year. So YouTube videos, there's probably about maybe 400 million, I didn't count them all, but 400 million views of various Rube Goldberg machines on YouTube. My favorite are done by Joseph Herscher, who I think captures Rube Goldberg's craziness and irreverence more than anyone else. And I want to play a short video called The Lunch Feeder from Joseph.
Moi j'aime trop, gitane. Qu'est-ce pas, zigane. Quand le jus de la guitare, il enlève mon clapard. Bravo, il caresse.
So Joseph has a bunch of really great YouTube videos. We'll include links to at least this one on the show notes. Joseph actually helped design parts of this game. We ended up using Rube Goldberg's cartoons for the first 12 levels, and for the last 6, we reused the assets, the 3D models from the first ones, and Joseph designed 3 of those levels. So I'm going to talk about myself, just for those who don't know who I am. I'm a game designer. I joined Lucasfilm Games back in 1982, and I was employee number 3. So I was right there at the beginning of Lucasfilm, which became LucasArts. And I project-led, programmed games through 1992 when I left the company. And most of the games I did were graphic adventure games. The first one was actually before Lucasfilm. That was Mix and Match Muppets for Children's Television Workshops, Sesame Place. Then Rescue and Fractalus. There's one we did based on Labyrinth, the movie, and Maniac Mansion, Zak McKracken, Indiana Jones, and Last Crusade. And more recently, outside of Lucasfilm, I got together with some of my friends who worked with me back in the 80s, Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, and we did a game called Thimbleweed Park. So back around 6-7 years ago, I knew I wanted to do an app for iOS, mostly for iPad. And I started looking at chain reaction machine type games and saw that there was a bunch that had already come out. When I searched for Rube Goldberg, they all said things like, that they were Rube Goldberg-like, that they had the feeling of Rube Goldberg, they were honoring Rube Goldberg, but none of them actually said they were official Rube Goldberg. None of them said they were actually official Rube Goldberg machines. So I wondered about, why is it that no one actually ever licensed his work? So I went to the website, sent them an email, and figuring, here I am, we're a small 2-person company. They're not likely to respond. But the next morning I got a phone call from Jennifer George, who's Rube's granddaughter. And she was great. She loved the idea. She loved my enthusiasm. And she said, yeah, let's work together. So she became my co-executive producer on the project. And the project launched in 2013. And we called it Rube Works, the official Rube Goldberg Inventions game. It launched on iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Unity Games was a new group within Unity Technologies that actually funded the project. They were going to create a game company, but after about 6 or 7 months, they thought maybe this wasn't a good idea because it'd be in competition with all their developers. So the rights to Rube Works reverted back to us. But we did license original cartoons, and we turned those into the levels, as I mentioned. And let me just going to go over the gameplay real briefly. Here's an example of one of his original cartoons called Simple Way to Get Fresh Orange Juice Upon Awakening. And we started with the art, we turned it into 3D models, and we took most of the objects out of the scene and put them into your toolbox. So you basically have to go through, put the objects in the right place. You get hints by tapping on objects, up to 3 or 4 hints per object to give you an idea of how they might interact with each other. Then you tie them with string as you need to. So either if there's a water bag hanging from the ceiling, that when you tie a string from there and strings through pulleys, and then when you're ready to go, you push the test button and see if you got it right. For all the levels, there were multiple ways to complete them. only one way where you could use all the objects, and that's where you got the best score. And for other ones, you still get points, but not a full score. Here's a 30-second video that we did for the iOS release. So earlier this year, actually, I went to OC6, Oculus Connect 6 last September, and started thinking about this would be a great project to work on. And then earlier this year, I said, okay, let's just do it. So got together with James Simpson, and he since I'm not really a Unity programmer, he did all the heavy-duty lifting, and we started working on it. This is a photo of an early on in the project. But really, before I made that decision, I wanted to know, can I really justify doing a VR port? Why, what would be better to do it in VR versus, the existing games? Could we actually make use of VR in some way? Also was wondering whether I should do it room scale, where you walk around to put things in the room, or have it like miniaturized in some way. One problem with doing a big room scale one is I felt you wouldn't be able to see the action very well. So, because you'd be too close to everything. Wasn't sure if we should use controllers where you point at something and move it, or if you could actually pick it up with your fingers. So I kind of backed up and said, well, what's really the story here? What are we trying to do? And came across the idea of a shadow box. And here's an example of one created by this guy, Andy Akers. He has some great examples on his website. But it's basically a small box, maybe a foot to 2 feet across. Usually they're highly detailed. Here's a close-up of that. Think of it like a dollhouse on steroids. Most of his have lighting. There's a light switch. So he often did things that were kind of eerie and moody. And I just fell in love with this idea that maybe we could kind of put the whole level inside of a shadow box. So here's a concept that we came up with of how this might look with the shadow box of, say, in a room that you're in. And maybe this is Rube Goldberg's workshop, and you, or maybe it's the eccentric billionaire or millionaire that had all these shadow boxes that you could actually were puzzles that you could actually animate and like automatrons. So here's a short video showing our work in progress, how the game works, same mechanics that you saw before, but using your hand. We'll post the link to this video also in the notes so you could read the text better. Basically, there's a glass on top of the guy's head that holds the juice of half an orange, and there's a half an orange there. We have a magnifying glass, and this creature called an ook doesn't like water, so if we can create a hole in the water bag, then the water comes down, it jumps away, triggering the Jack-in-the-Box, which is a miniature conductor who gets the musician to start playing his cymbals. And that squishes the orange, which then squeezes juice into the cup. And the sound of the juice dripping in the glass wakes George up, and that's the alarm clock. And you get scores based on, again, how many of the objects you used. So we had a few issues that we were still dealing with. First, we were looking at lighting, and having done this game, essentially finished it 6 years ago. It's hard for me to see the game outside of the way it was. And thankfully, we had some early play testers. Torin was one who suggested, why this is early morning. Why are you using lighting that looks like there's full room lighting rather than, say, early morning light coming in? So the first change was, change the lighting, and that just also that warms it up. It makes it feel much more endearing. Looks much better. The same model as everything else is the same here. The only difference really is the lighting. Another issue is that in the original game, we have a window in pretty much all the scenes, and there's a distant view, like a panorama outside the window, like a drop of cartoon art. And here, since you're in a box, that was going to be a problem. So we came up with the idea of using a portal effect, where you can have a shader display a scene from another area, a 3D scene. And that's something that we hope to get going. So you actually look through into the box and you see a window which looks like it has background that's miles away. And I think that's all I was going to do. I'll answer some more questions, and watch us. You can follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm probably most active, at David B. Fox. Rube Works also has a Twitter account, but check it out and watch the progress. Hopefully we'll launch on various VR and maybe AR platforms later this year. Thank you. Any questions?
Slick Rick is first. You got the megaphone. Go ahead and accept it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Show me where you are.
I'm just in the
Okay.
here.
I see you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David. I grew up playing a lot of your games, so this is really exciting to see you here. My question is, have you talked with the Oculus company about getting your game onto their platform, and are you able to even talk about that?
When I first started thinking about doing this was last year at OC6 at Oculus Connect 6, and at that time they basically said, "Yeah, no special treatment. Just send us a proposal, and we'll let you know what we think." And I started looking at that, and I said, "No, I don't know if I want to do the proposal yet. I wanted to make sure that I could actually make this happen." So I haven't connected with them yet on that level. But in the meantime, they've now stated that they're going to open up like a second store or more inclusive store, or maybe less inclusive, where you can you don't need the same hoop that you have to jump through in order to get your app published.
Right. Yeah,
you can
they have sort of, sorry, yeah, they are opening the door that way, and there also is the side quest route as well. So
right. So between that, side quest, also, Rube Works itself is on Steam, the original version for Windows, Mac, and Linux. So there shouldn't be any problem with getting a Steam version up there. So there'll be other ways to get it out there. I'm not too worried about that. I'd love to see versions of this, in AR. I mean, it'd be great to to have the whole thing in front of you on the table where you can reach in and do stuff. So for now, I mean, I'm funding this myself. It's a really small budget. I'm working with my friend James Simpson, who's doing all the coding. I'm the one who keeps on haranguing him about what has to be changed. It's relatively slow paced because that it gives us time to get the thing working, but then start adding all these features and polish to make it really special. So yeah, I'm sure that if you have a question, you'll find a way to be able to use it, if not through official channels, through side loading. But the fact that it was a Unity game where there was connections to Unity, I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Rick. And then Nicole is up next.
Great.
You...
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hey, David. Awesome.
Where
It's really
are you?
great to see you.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to recognize you.
I know. We don't have our spaces, but yeah. So really great presentation. I love the shadow box inspiration, especially. I think that's a really great way to interpret the license. The IP. I was curious, what was the most surprising thing in your exploration of going from a 2D sort of a 2D screen, a flat screen, into 3D? Like, what was the most surprising design challenge that you had?
Yeah, well, there's so many things that we're still dealing with. One of the things which I didn't mention was that in the original game, we moved the camera around. So when we play the machine back, we have each object has a camera position and a zoom position, so that as it's being triggered, the camera automatically moves to that point and zoom in. So like in the original one, like in that thing where the guy wakes up, you're in on a close shot on him, so you actually see him move his head up. And so you do a lot of movement. That's not going to work in VR because you're going to get everyone motion sick. Besides the fact that this is a small box, you really don't have a camera that you can take control of. So the concept that we came up with, which we haven't implemented yet, is to use a spotlight and kind of use the same coordinates and use the zoom parameter to control the width, or how big the spot is. So if it's zoomed in close, it'd be a very tight spot, and if it's a wide shot, it'd be wider. And just have the spot move from point to point to help you track what's happening. And maybe make that an option to turn the spotlight on or off as you desire. So that's one issue. The one I mentioned before about being able to see through windows. Another one, there's two of the levels that take place outdoors. So I'm still not sure if those are going to work the way I want them to in a shadow box. Like we have one which is on a totally different scale, where you have a car which is about this big, and a driveway and a garage, and the whole thing is on a much different scale. And in that level, there's also both so there's a flea and a car. And so how is that going to work? We'll let you know. And of course, in the 2D one, we could easily, if we don't want you to look at something, we would just slide it off screen. So there's all sorts of UI stuff which we're dealing with, where something just moved off screen, and here you can't really do that. There is no off screen. So some of that's still in progress. We found some tricks through clipping. There's a pause menu, which right now we have working, which looks kind of like the one in the game, but things that were still simple to do on a flat screen where you know what the dimensions were are impossible here. So we're hitting those as we come up. I have a whole list of issues that we knew about ahead of time, and every time we get to a new level, there's another one or two things I have to add to the list because of things which just worked on an iPad where it doesn't now. But I'm between the two of us, between a few testers so far that I've opened it up to get initial feedback, I'm confident we can come up with solutions. And this is basically my decades of training as a graphic adventure game player. When someone would come up and say, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. Why can you do this, this, and that?" So I'm really great at coming up with stories or reasons or excuses why something's okay. So it's kind of a fun challenge.
That's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay. Any other questions?
Cool. So don't have any other questions in the queue, and if nobody wants to raise their hand, we'll just open things up and we can just mingle, and you can come up and talk to David if he's got time to hang around. He'd probably...
I see somebody named Mike. Is Mike?
Oh, yeah, Mike,
have a
Mike just showed up. Yes. Perfect.
Mike, where are you?
Thanks for the presentation. Have you thought about like being able to change scale, like go inside of the shadow box
Yeah.
to see like, a big scale of it?
It could. It's possible. One of the issues is that when we did the original art and animation, we kept the polygon count and the detail level pretty low, which worked well with cartoons and at the resolution you're looking at it with. But I'm concerned that already you're going to, like looking at this room now compared to, say, when you look at the scene I showed you, compared to, say, the physical shadow box I showed you, I would love to get a lot more detail in there, like pictures on the wall or other things that are non-interactive, just to make it feel more, more charming, more immersive, more fun, without having to go back and redo all the models and all the artwork. I'm afraid that if you put someone inside it very close up, you might end up with it just looking really, really dated. But it's not impossible. The other thing was that when the game was, when it first came out, I'd say it was somewhat successful. A lot of use in schools, a lot of classrooms will buy masses of these for their students to play on iPads or computers, usually as part of a Rube Goldberg curriculum, where they'll play the game through a bunch of levels and then they'll go off and actually have to build physical ones. And by playing the game, it kind of puts them in the headspace of problem solving and thinking outside the box, really. Plus the humor part of it, getting it so that it's actually there's a story, there's the fun part of it. But it wasn't successful to the point where we hoped, where we could then start adding more and more levels. And so we shipped it with 18. The first 12 levels are based purely on Rube Goldberg's cartoon, so we actually took the cartoon and then we would duplicate it essentially as a game. The last 6, 3 of which I mentioned Joseph Herscher helped us design, we reused the assets for the first 12 and came up with new puzzles that felt like Rube Goldberg's and used those. So again, as a cost saving, it's a pretty limited budget when we did the game initially. Generally, we figured it's about $10,000 to $15,000 or $20,000 per level to build new ones. So based on the sales in the initial version, that wasn't possible. We also had ideas that it'd be great to do a sandbox version of this, where we give you all the objects and you come up with whatever Rube machine you want to. Doing that either in a VR in a room scale setting would be really good, or I guess you do it in a small room. I think I would rather do room scale for that. But if who knows, if the game turns out to be successful, then I would love to continue expanding by adding more levels and doing a sandbox version of it. But in the meantime, even if it's not, it's a super great learning experience to go through this whole exercise and see how this goes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Torrin has a question.
Yeah, Torrin's got a question.
Cool, thanks. I was just curious, with the small teams and the tools that we have, and VR being relatively new technology, how does it feel developing a game in this environment compared to, say, the early days at Lucasfilm?
Good question. Well, the early days at Lucas, for me, this would be like the 80s. I was there from 82 to 92, really. And most of the teams were pretty small. We ended up with about maybe 5 to 8 people on a team. It would change based on artists coming in and out. When we did Finley Park, that was also a relatively small team. If you had all the testers and everyone who had some role as actors, everything would probably be 40 people. But in terms of the core team, maybe 5 to 10 people. So this is very much like that. If we had to do new art and new sound effects and new animations, then of course this would be a much bigger team. So right now it's really just using existing assets, and both myself and James are trying to do all things to make it work. Right now, I mean, our process is James is wiring everything up, showing me what he had to do to make it work. Then I go in there to each level and add his changes to VRize it and make it work, and then uncovers, does new bugs that we didn't know about, which we have to go back together and figure out what those are. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of all the levels, all the bugs will have been squashed through the first levels we do. So 9 of them are playable now, 9 out of 18 at some level, but with each of them having issues that show up. So I love the idea that you can do this with a small team. I've never worked on a AAA game with hundreds and hundreds of people on it, so that's so foreign to me. I've always worked with relatively small groups on games, and love that you can pivot and make it happen. Is anyone watching? What's it called on Apple Plus? Someone remembers the name. There's a show on the game industry. It's a kind of a comedy serial series. Okay. So anyway, I'm really enjoying that because it reminds me of how things could be if I were in a AAA studio, which I'm not. So yay. Okay. Does that answer your question, Torrin? Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, we'll be here for a little while.
So let's just open it up here.